I was taken on as a I was taken on as a contractor at that time to assist them with the organization of the potential Titan build. So from there, 2015, we spoke. I think it was June 2015, they offered me a contract that was all going to be pending getting visa approval. As you can tell, I'm from Scotland, so moving over to the US, it would involve immigration authorities. My wife, my daughter and I, we were granted O visa to come in and work in the US, which is extraordinary ability visa. My qualifications and background was sufficient enough with backup from people in the industry to get me across. So we got that in January 2016. That was granted. We sold everything up and we moved across to Seattle, Washington.
And when you arrived to OceanGate at that time, what was the company construct? Who did you report to?
So, being one of the directors, I was immediately responsible to the Chief Operating Officer and the CEO. The Chief Operating Officer at the time was Neil McCurdy, and the CEO was Stockton Rush. That was the two individuals that I would report to directly at that time.
And what was your role and responsibility as the Director of Marine Operations?
Of course. So I shall, and this is from OceanGate website, I hope you have no objections to me reading what my job description is. This is readily available online.
No objections.
Thank you. And this is how the company portrayed me. So, David Lockridge, Director of Marine Operations. As Director of Marine Operations for OceanGate Incorporated, David Lockridge is responsible for ensuring the safety of all crew and clients during submersible and surface operations, for maintaining and operating all marine assets, and for achieving the mission objectives during diverse and challenging submersible expeditions. So, over and above the job title, I was the only, in my eyes, qualified submersible pilot to fly the assets that we had. I was the only one with experience in new build submersibles, dealing with classification agencies. With the two subs that we had at the time, I was responsible for training. So I trained staff-wise, I trained Isabel Johnston, she was one of my trainee pilots, Alexander Russell, and Bonnie Carroll. That was the only three employees of OceanGate that I was responsible for their training. Not one of them got qualified as a pilot that would certify them to take passengers or do solo dives in the sub. Externally to the company, I did training for a gentleman, Scott Perezinski, who went on to be on the board of OceanGate. Having the only one with experience, I was responsible for all the maintenance. I tied in with APL, the Applied Physics Lab, in terms of the project for Titan, the build that the company got me across to assist, run, and be the chief pilot for. I was responsible for training manuals for Cyclops. Antipodes manuals were already there. They just needed tweaked ever so slightly just to bring them up to date. I would deal with ABS when it came time to do any classification for Antipodes. I would carry out the test dives for Antipodes with the ABS surveyors, which I did on several times. And anytime we were doing offshore operations, I would liaise with the vessel captain. I would liaise, if it was an internal to US territorial waters, I would liaise with the Coast Guard, port authorities. And in terms of the mission specialists, well, term that loosely, the paying clients, I would meet with them. I was, how I felt, a show pony. I was made by the company to stand up there and do talks. I think it was difficult. I had to go up, do presentations all about my experience. In my eyes, even at the time, they were selling me as part of this project for people to come in, pay money for future investment in Titan, the submersible.
When you arrived at OceanGate, was there a set training plan or procedure for members to become crew or pilots?
None.
Recorder, if I can ask you to please bring up Exhibit 081, which is the OceanGate Pilot and Training Task Book. Mr. Lockridge, have you ever seen this document?
Yes, I have, yes.
Can you please explain the purpose of this document?
The purpose of the document, it tied in with the operations manual for Cyclops and the MS Lars, which was the platform, the dive platform for Cyclops. The pilot training manual itself covered a broad variety of training for the submersible pilots itself. So it provided stability calculations, gas calculations, makeup of the hull, emergency procedures, standard operating procedures. I wrote into this manual as much information as I possibly could. There were things that, unfortunately, senior management, Stockton Rush, Neil McCurdy, I was reined in slightly. There is a lot more I would have put in this manual. The intention for OceanGate, unbeknownst to me when I came across, they wanted to be able to qualify a pilot in a day. Somebody that had never sat in a submersible. They wanted people to basically come in, get checked out as pilots, and be able to take passengers down in the sub. That is a huge red flag. That is a no-no. You don't do that. It's a long process. It's not just a case of sitting down, driving a submersible around. There's a lot more to it. You've got to understand topside operations, weather, limitations on vessels, launch recoveries. There's a lot to cover. And I met resistance with that, but I got into this manual as much as I possibly could to get it approved by senior management, which it did.
In this manual, as it states, manned submersible Cyclops 1.
Yes.
Was this specific to the Cyclops 1?
Correct.
Was there another manual for the Antipodes?
I said there was a manual for Antipodes, yes, that's correct.
And then was there a manual for the Titan?
I never did anything for Titan. As you will hear throughout the day, I was kept away from the project.
Understood. So you had stated that some of you tried to put as much information into this as you could to
That's
include
correct.
topside operations and other things as such. With regard to that, you said that you raised your concerns to OceanGate management.
Oh, for a lot of things. Anytime I'm not, everybody that knows me, they know I can be slightly outspoken. I don't like being bullied into anything. I don't tolerate liars. And if I see something that is a risk, not only to myself, to anybody else, I will put my hand up. And everybody that knows me, I've always been like that from day one, even when I was in the Navy.
So with regards to pilot training,
Yes.
this was it your program, would you say?
Yeah, I would say, yeah. When I came across, Stockton had rough notes that he had. Nothing was from memory, nothing was printed in his mind what he wanted in terms of a training manual. So long ago. Yeah, as far as I can remember, everything was on me in terms of that training manual for Cyclops 1.
What was Mr. Rush's experience that you know of?
So, I had been led to believe that he was trained, as I said, please don't quote me, a gentleman called Scott Cassell, who's I may be wrong on that, who is a submersible pilot, and Stockton verified that he was qualified by that individual. He since 2009, when the company was set up, he, alongside the contractor Tim Catterson, who was present yesterday, would pretty much do all the dives for Antipodes or Cyclops before I came along.
Can you tell me about the different submersibles that OceanGate had operational when you arrived to the company, specifically the Antipodes and the Cyclops one?
Of course. Antipodes is a 1,200-foot submersible. It's a 5-man submersible, so it'll be a pilot, 4 passengers. It's got acrylic dome either end, so the pilot would actually fly that vehicle from the center section of the sub itself. The sub design was approved long before I came on the go. That submersible, from memory, was initially a diver lockout vehicle from the 70s. I think it's roughly the same age as me. And it got changed under approval by ABS to make it more of a passenger submersible. It had an upper hatch with a tower on it, which we'd use for egress, ingress of passengers getting in and out the sub. And very basic buoyancy systems on that. It did have emergency systems, full life support system on there as well. The Cyclops one was under development, and when I came across during 2015 and at the start of 2016, before they were dismissed by the OceanGate Engineering Department and Stockton Rush, I worked closely with APL, the Applied Physics Lab, Dave Dyer and Mike and the rest of the guys at that team, yes.
You had mentioned earlier that the Cyclops one was previously a class submersible.
That's correct.
And when it came to be owned by OceanGate, there was modifications that were made that took it out of class.
Very much so, yes. The entire control system, steering system, propulsion, everything was removed. And I think that is why, when I saw that document in 2015, the approval letter or report from who I think it was, DNV, classing the hull, the acrylic, and the upper hatch, I can see why that is all they would recertify. Fortunately, at that time, we had excellent engineering support from APL. So they provided electrical, electronics, mechanical, and I worked very closely with them until Tony Nissen started.
And when you, at this point in 2016, when you came in with the company, how far along was the Titan project?
There was nothing. It was a concept. There was no material. Nothing had been wound. No material had been fabricated. Nothing. It had been made clear to me from the outset I was coming across to assist with the build. My experience working with class was going to be paramount in actually producing a successful product. That was the intent, and yeah, there was nothing at all. APL, everything control systems wise, they were testing things on Cyclops 1, and it was still in its infancy. The amount of dives that we did in that sub, that systems would fail, the MSLRs, the dive platform, there'd be issues with that. Everything at that time, even then, it was experimental, but at the same time, the intention was once everything was finished with Cyclops 1 and the company and APL were happy with everything, those systems would be fully not integrated, so they weren't going to get moved from Cyclops, but they would be built hardier, stronger, more reliable, and they were going to get built for Titan. When I moved across, there was nothing. Nothing was produced, nothing was finalized with APL. There was a serious shift in the organization from spring 2016 through to, I would say, summer 2016, where the Applied Physics Lab were phased out. Unfortunately, after the incident on the Andrea Doria, I was phased out of the project completely. I was told everything was going to be getting done in-house with Tony Nissen and his team, who I had no confidence in whatsoever, and I seriously voiced my concerns to senior management That was the Chief Operating Officer, Neil McCurdy, to Stockton Rush, the CEO. I'm never happy with any of the decisions that were potentially going into this project. That was pre and post manufacture of what was getting done. I was phased out completely.
And why do you believe you were phased out?
Because I embarrassed the CEO on the Andrea Doria wreck. I didn't mean to, but there was an incident on the Doria. It was meant to be my dive. I was meant to take 4 paying clients down to the wreck, and the intention of that entire trip with these mission specialists was we had new sonar fitted to the submersible. We were going to be doing 3D modeling of the wreck. The wreck itself, it's dangerous. We knew it was falling to bits. We did our research, and the plan was I was going to be dropping down over several days, keeping distance from the wreck completely, and basically circumnavigating the wreck at 50 meters away and carrying out sonar scans to create this 3D model of the wreck itself, which, in all good intentions, it was so that divers, future divers, can see exactly what's happening with the decay and degradation of the hull of the Doria itself. It is a very famous vessel, but deadly. I mean, I don't know today, but at the time, I think there was like 18 deaths on the Doria with technical divers diving on it. Unfortunately, the CEO decided that he wanted to take it down. I objected, because I know sometimes he could do things to please himself. He told me I was staying out. I objected again. I was sort of reined in at the time. Just remember, I'm the CEO, you're just an employee. I eventually persuaded him to let me come in on the dive, so we reduced the paying passengers down to 3, and Stockton said he was taking it down. The first attempt that we did when we were on the surface, the MS Lars just got blown away with the currents. We did tell him, he wouldn't listen. The vessel captain was very wary about the currents at the time. I tried to give my input in terms of the weather. It's a very exposed area. So we towed the vehicle so that it was in a good position. Stockton took the helm. The controls for Cyclops, it's actually done at the back of the vehicle, and there is camera systems mounted to the, I don't know now, but there was camera systems mounted only to the front, just above the acrylic sphere, the forward viewing dome. And you controlled it on the back with, yes, the PlayStation controller. And when we went to do the dive platform was submerged down to its working depth, 12 feet, 15 feet. Took it down so that it's away from the adverse weather conditions. He attempted to take it off. He didn't do it very well. He ended up bending the dive skids on the bottom, the landing skids, which are usually flat, which contained the drop weights. We deployed diver to verify. And anyway, we got the thumbs up. He departed from the MS Lars at depth, came up to the surface, which we usually did, established main communications with the vessel. And from there, he took it down. I kept saying, please keep your distance. Don't tell me what to do. That was the conversation. He decided to go straight for the wreck. He had on sonar, clear sonar image, you could see the wreck, and boom. As I said, it's not very deep. Visibility's not excellent, but it was clear enough, good ambient light that day, and he came straight down, hard on the bottom. No trimming, no ballast, nothing. Smash straight down on the bottom. Visibility went everywhere. You could see a silhouette, and it was the 2 clients that were sitting in the viewing dome right next to the acrylic. And they were like, oh my God, we are right on the wreck. So I said to Stockton, please, all stop telling me what to do. Stockton, all stop. We have to see what's going on here. We have to look at our surroundings, which is standard practice for any competent submersible pilot. And from there, visibility cleared. We could see metal plates, and we could clearly see the starboard side of the bow of the Andrea Doria. We could see all the debris, we could see hawser lines, we could see panels coming off. It was an absolute mess. So I said, Stockton, please, and he just kept arguing with me in the sub. Very unbecoming of a submersible pilot. I was trying to guide him, I'm trying to give the best course of action to get him out of it. No matter what, I'm doing this. So he blew air in the tank, in the ballast tank, came off the bottom, motored full stick ahead, unbeknownst to everybody else, and I don't know why. He decided to turn the submersible 180 degrees at speed, still coming ahead, so he wasn't looking at his surroundings. He could have quite easily went up into the viewing dome, he could have went up into the tower, because it's got a clear acrylic hatch on there. And he basically drove at full speed into the port side of the bow, and we could hear the cracking of the fairing as he got us jammed in underneath. So I'm not going to say how foul my language was, but it wasn't good. And at that point, it was unprofessional behaviour of him. He started to panic. And the first thing was, do we have enough life support on board? I was like, Stockton, of course we got enough life support. We need to get out here. When do you think the dive team could come to get us out? Stockton, please, give me the controls. I'm going to get us out of this. We're stuck, we're stuck, we're stuck. Repeatedly, every time I went to take the controller from him, he pushed it further and further behind him, inside the submersible itself. I said, I can be quite vocal sometimes. At that point, it went on and on and on. I'm looking up inside the upper hatch. I could see where there was fishing line draping over the top of the sub, all the metal rebar. There was debris everywhere. He never once got out the seat in the back of the sub to go and look at his surroundings. So I said, let's get a communications check. Let's talk to the top side, let them know what's going on. What if there's no comms? I'm like, give me the controls. Let me talk to them. Let me talk to top side, and I'm going to get us out of this. This went on and on and on for a period of time. And eventually it took one of the paying clients to turn round, and Renata, who you're interviewing on Thursday, she shouted at Stockton to give me the effing controller. She had tears in her eyes. He reached round behind him. I had my head up inside the tower, so I'm still looking at the wreck, and he clattered it off the right side of my head. The controller landed on the deck plate. One of the buttons came off, the robust PlayStation controller. And I picked it up, repaired it, and had us out 10, 15 minutes. Motored away from the wreck, came away 50 metres using the sonar, turned us round, dropped down, and I said, that is what we're supposed to do. And at that point, he was upset. He said, I owe you one, anything I can do for you. We came back on board the ship, and the divers had to reattach us onto the MS Lars once we recovered to the surface, because the deck skids were so badly damaged when he did the departing from the platform, because he did it incorrectly. And came back up on top. Obviously, the paying clients, I know one of them was definitely a good friend of Stockton's. We had Renata and one of Renata's friends. And from there, it was all, oh, cheers, David saved us. Slight exaggeration. It shouldn't have got to the stage it got to. If he in any way had behaved like any other submersible pilot I know and looked at his surroundings, talked on the radio, on the communications, let the top side know so there's an issue. He didn't do it. And then because people were cheering and the passengers were obviously very grateful for what I did, which to me is just my job, at that point he stopped talking to me. And yeah, it went on from there. Within a few months.
Mr. Lockridge?
Yeah, sorry.
I appreciate that. Thank
No
you.
worries.
Just want to ask you a few questions
Of
with
course.
regards to the
Yeah.
Andrea Doria. Did the skids get stuck in the bottom of
get
the
s-
ocean floor?
They got stuck under metal plates right up at the bow. When the way he drove it down, down. It was so hard. There was metal plates lifted up underneath the mud, and the metal plates landed up on the front of the landing skids, staring at the starboard side of the bow before he did that manoeuvre that took us in onto the port side and jammed the fairing underneath.
And just to be clear, did you state, you didn't state this, but did he
Yeah.
throw the controller at you at that
That's
point?
correct. And he hit me on the side of my head on the starboard side, yeah.
And in that situation, had you not been there to get it out or to assist in maneuvering the submersible to
Yeah.
a safe place, what would have been the emergency response or procedure from topside or
Of course.
as a pilot?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would have notified topside immediately, which is what I wanted to do. And on call, when we left Boston, we notified the US Coast Guard what we were going to be doing, the port authorities, when we were taking the vehicle out. And we also, and I can't remember the name of them, I may have documentation on it. There was a commercial diving company that I communicated with, and they did an agreement with us that if there was any issue during the dive, they would come out and offer assistance. They had a full air and mixed gas system to do deep diving to bring us back out. In coordination with the vessel captain at the time, anytime we were going out, what we would do is, because we didn't have another asset on board the ship, what we would do is, me personally, I would reach out to organisations that are working in the area. It's very easy to find out. I had people that I knew that worked for Oceaneering, some of the companies that would work Gulf of Mexico, East Coast, West Coast of America. So I would reach out to them and they would know what we were going to do. So anytime we would do an operation, that was part of my job.
So this brings up a subject or question. So you departed Boston,
Yes,
and you were towed by a offshore supply vessel, I'm gonna guess, or a
That
tow vessel,
that's correct. Yes, yes,
and you made notification to the Coast Guard Sector Boston.
that's correct.
Did the Cyclops 1 have an oceanographic research vessel designation letter?
It did have a reference number from memory, yes. It did have, yeah, I think so. And it was classed, I know under the US Coast Guard regulations, and it was in the document that was released in 1993, which is still in effect. There is inspected vessels for submersibles, and it's anything over carrying 6 passengers. We were under that with the 5 in total, which is classed as an uninspected vehicle. Yeah.
So did the Cyclops 1 have a certificate of inspection from the United States Coast Guard?
That's a negative. It was uninspected.
Recorder, can you please bring up Exhibit 21, which is a letter to the stakeholders in December of 2015 from Mr. Stockton Rush? And I'm just going to ask a few questions regarding the Andrea Doria mission.
Yeah,
You had stated that there was 3 mission specialists aboard,
that's correct.
and by mission specialists, you referred to them as paid clients.
That's correct.
Can you explain to me a little more on what that means?
Anybody that was interested. So the company itself, the whole idea behind the company was to make money. That's it. There was very little in the way of science. There was very little in the way of media. So I know you would read things online, but at the end of the day, they weren't taking samples. Video footage, who would get all that information? Nobody. Very strong social media team that would sell the company, sell seats, basically, on Antipodes, on Cyclops itself. The organization that we can see there, Argus Expeditions, I never had any involvement with them. It wasn't until yesterday I even remembered that was a thing. So when I watched the interviews, So yeah, these paying clients, they would pay to come in the sub. I would say 98% of the time it was me that would take them down, being the most experienced in the company. Yeah.
And were they scientists?
No. No, they were paying passengers. It was people that had money. Even when we did the dives, we were meant to do a dive following year, I think it was, and it was, don't quote me, Farallon Islands, but we ended up being weathered off, and we ended up coming into the San Francisco Bay and doing the first manned submersible dives down Alcatraz. The clients that had paid to go on this wreck that was offshore from San Francisco were more than happy to be, their fee went towards sitting in the sub and me driving them down to the bottom of Alcatraz Rock. So yeah, I had no involvement in the selling. I was 100% involved in piloting and taking these people down.
I just want to reference this document that we brought up, which is Exhibit 21. And in the third sentence underneath the paragraph Argus Expeditions, which is referring to the May 7th through 14th Cyclops 1 mission on the Andrea Doria. It says, on a very positive note, the first potential client we contacted is committed to the $20,000 fee to join us for 2 days, including just one 3-hour dive, and has also secured 2 more individuals at $20,000, each despite our lack of significant supporting information, vessels, cancellation policies, exact timing. Do you know what fee these people paid for that?
So, from memory, I can't remember for the Andrea Doria, but I think it was $35,000 to dive with me on the Alcatraz. A lot of money.
Did Mr. Rush ever discuss with you Coast Guard regulations regarding passenger vessel operations?
Yeah, he did, and I think that was I don't think I know, that was the whole intent of having retired Admiral Lockwood on the board, was to get us through some of the processes in dealing with the Coast Guard. So Stockton was aware about how we had to get the Coast Guard involved, especially operating in territorial waters. It's very important to do that and abide by all the rules and regulations. So no, he was very aware of the Coast Guard, yeah.
Was he aware that one passenger on a submersible for hire is considered a small passenger vessel operation and requires a certificate of inspection by the United States Coast Guard?
I don't know if he did know that. Okay. I don't.
Thank you.
No.
I'd like to go back to discussing with the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab. What was OceanGate's contractual relationship with the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab?
From my understanding, when I came across for my interview in the summer of 2015, I met with the Applied Physics Lab team, and I went down, Chief Operating Officer, CEO. We went down, we met with them, and the involvement that I could see and was told was they were going to be involved in the design, the construction, and also the assisting with the classing of the vehicle itself. This is Titan I'm talking about. Yeah.
And what was the relationship between OceanGate and the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab with regards to workplace environment and in your own personal?
Okay. I'm sure I'm not the only person that's saying it. Stockton could be a very awkward person. And if he wasn't happy with somebody, he was very vocal. Very vocal. And he would bump his gums basically about APL, the team leader, about Dave, about Mike. He would blame everything on everybody else. You know, if the submersible Cyclops, which they were working on developing systems, if it wasn't fast enough, He would he would talk about it constantly at length. Um, I had a very good relationship with the team. I communicated with them on a regular basis, became good friends with Dave Dyer, who's going to be appearing this week. Yeah, I was given full confidence in seeing what they had previously produced, and they obviously hadn't done any manned submersibles, but they'd done, you know, components for subsea, you know, these AUVs and stuff like that. I think for me, having the university involved, it gave this. It was confidence in what was going ahead. I think it would have been slightly different if I had rocked up for that interview and Stockton had said, "Oh, I'm building a sub." I saw the facility at Everett, which I'm sure you've been to and seen it. It's in a boatyard. Most manufacturers have got decent facilities, clean room areas for working on. There was none of that. So to have that collaboration, and it was a collaboration, I felt good about it. And that was one of the main contributing factors to me going across and working for OceanGate, having that on site.
And as the director of marine operations
Yeah.
with the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab, what was your role there? What was your responsibility? Like, what were you doing with them? It was more of an engineering. Were you testing their operations? Were you testing the new things they were putting in? And what was your opinion of those new changes?
Okay, so I was never a fan of the PlayStation controller. We did eventually, in certain occasions, because of failure, we would go hardwired into the sub, which in my eyes was a lot better. And the Applied Physics Lab, in my involvement, I would tie in with the team anytime they wanted to make changes to any of the circuitry or mechanical aspects of the dive platform of Cyclops 1 to work on the development, which was eventually going to lead to the final design of Titan. I'd be in the water with them. I would take the guys diving in the sub. We would test it. We would have lines on the subs just to see limitations, how far we could push the systems that they had, batteries, controls, trim systems, everything. I had a good relationship with them, put it that way, and we would dive in the sub a lot until they were phased out.
Mr. Lockridge, at this time, we're going to take a 10-minute break.
Perfect.
The hearing will now recess and reconvene at 9:40. This hearing is now back in session. Lieutenant Commander Whalen, please continue.
Mr. Lockridge, I'd like to pick back up roughly with the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab in Ocean Gate at that time, 2016 to 2017. There were some changes to the Ocean Gate employees and added some director of engineering. Can you speak to the additional changes to the director of engineering and what the company brought in?
So Stockton, Stockton.
Turn your mic on. Okay.
So Stockton decided to do all engineering in-house. He said he had lost confidence in APL. I think that was mostly a time thing in his head. As I said, he could be very impatient. So he introduced Tony Nissen and brought him in as a director of engineering for the Titan build, which was going to Titanic. As we all know, they'd already put everything online that submersible was going to the Titanic. So what happened was, over the course of a few months, Tony took over. They phased Dave out, they phased Mike out, and I don't know what the relationship was with the head of APL and Stockton. I think Stockton maintained an office in the Applied Physics Lab building. I'm not sure how often he would go down there or what sort of interaction there was. I know, obviously, hearing what we've been hearing the last few days and looking at the social media side of things, they did maintain some form of relationship to proceed with these third-scale models that they tested. But I couldn't tell you how far it went in terms of doing the changes. This is the relationship with APL. I couldn't tell you how far APL got with the final design of Titan. And all I know is when Tony took over, they were going to be changing a lot. So, me being quite vocal, I said to Stockton I wasn't happy that we were phasing out APL. It got to the point that Tony and Stockton, I remember one day Dave came in to see me. We used to borrow dive gear from each other. And Dave came in to see me, and they stood in the corner, wouldn't even speak to him. And when Dave left, they told me I've never to speak to that gentleman again, which is ridiculous.
Who was never to speak to the gentleman again?
I was never to speak to Dave Dyer again. This is during 2016. So I had to have no correspondence with Dave Dyer. That's what I was told.
And that was said to you by who?
Oh, that was said to me by Stockton Rush and Tony Nissen.
What was the relationship that you witnessed between Mr. Tony Nissen and the University of Washington Applied Physics Lab?
Tony wasn't happy with APL. Stockton wasn't happy with APL. The two of them were very vocal, saying that they did not want APL to do anything else with regards to the design concept and the build of Titan. They were going to do it all themselves.
Do you know why they made that decision?
Can I say arrogance? Thinking they could do this on their own without proper engineering support. I mean proper engineering support from people that have built things that have been subsea. May not be submersibles, but known products. Proper engineers that work for the university. So.
Did Tony Nissen have any, that you were aware of, any previous submersible design or construction?
He had none, which I voiced my opinions on to the Chief Operating Officer, Neil McCurdy, and Stockton Rush, and Joe Perry. I think pretty much all of them.
And what was their response to your concerns?
Stockton will do what he wants to do. That was it. So dismissed. And I didn't let it lie. I kept saying we need to get APL involved, or you know, there was all this talk of getting Boeing involved, NASA involved. I never saw Boeing, never saw NASA. All that was spoken to me in my interview when I was going across. So hearing all these big names, and APL, obviously, I met with those guys. I met with the team. And because previously one of the submersibles I'd worked on, and it was an older sub, we ended up, one of the rescue subs, it was made of GRP, glass resin plastic. That hull was incredible, but it had reached its life cycle, and we changed that over to steel. So I had worked with non-metallic hulls before, so the whole appeal of coming across and doing that, it was amazing.
And you believed originally that it was going to be classed?
100%. 100%. That submersible was going to be classed. Because of my, because of my interaction with, I think the last big project that I worked on prior to moving across, James Fisher Defence gave me the role as a contractor. It was just over a year's project. I was the chief pilot responsible for the finalisation of the refit, recommissioning, and trials and training for the Swedish Navy. That vehicle, 52 ton. I worked closely with Lloyd's. Lloyd's were in the facility in Scotland on a regular basis. I worked with them closely. I would dive with them to obviously see it through all the trials and basically the certification for that vehicle itself. So yeah, I said I'm quite happy dealing with the individuals that I worked with Lloyd's. I gave them the names, just wait. So.
Was it ever part of any contract that you signed with regards to coming over to operate a class submersible?
I signed a contract, an employment contract. The initial contract, it never had anything stating classed in it. And then the addendum that I had to sign when I was coerced into signing an additional contract after the Doria incident, the company decided not to pay for my wife and my daughter's permanent residence anymore unless I signed this additional employment contract. That didn't state anything about classification in it either. Before
I move ahead with the classification, can you just referenced an addendum to your contract. Can you please explain?
Sure. So I signed a employment contract with the company, and this is in the summer of 2015. In that contract, it clearly stated this contract will be invalid if immigration authority isn't approved for me to come across with my family and actually work legally in the US. The attorneys that we used, the immigration attorney, were based in Seattle. They managed to push through our immigration, as I said earlier, as an O visa, extraordinary ability, because of the role and the experience that I brought to the organisation. And after the Doria, when Stockton pretty much stopped talking to me rationally, I was called round one day. It was the end of the summer 2016, and Chief Operating Officer and Neil McCurdy and Stockton Rush, we got talking. I just thought it was a general chit-chat, coffee, and it led to Stockton saying they were no longer willing to pay for my wife or my daughter's permanent residence. I wasn't happy. I seriously voiced my displeasure in what they decided to do. I knew fine well it's because it's not embarrassing, but you know, I probably did. I embarrassed him in front of clients. He wasn't happy, and I knew that was the turning point in our relationship within OceanGate. So I walked away very upset, went home, told my wife. Stockton had been tried phoning constantly that evening, leaving voice messages, texts. I ignored them. I said to Carol, that's us, we're done, we're moving back to Scotland. I'm not standing for this. And anyway, went in the following morning, late, I did it intentionally, and the CEO of Stockton came up and he said, I'm so sorry for yesterday. I've had a change of heart and I have decided I can't lose you. I need you on this project and I will pay for it. But you have to sign this addendum to your employment contract stipulating that if you leave over the next 12 months, you will reimburse us. So I said, okay, it's simple enough. Once I signed it, I was told by Stockton, and make sure you do not tell the immigration attorney that I've made you do this. So I obviously told my wife. So we did this, we proceeded on. So yeah, that's where we were at with that.
Just for clarification, what year and month was that you were?
It was August, September. So whenever the Doria dive was, June, July, August, yeah. It was all within a matter of weeks, whether it be a 10, 12-week period, everything happened.
And this was 2016?
That's correct, yes. The relationship broke down and yeah.
Getting back to the classification,
Yeah.
and your understanding that you thought that the Titan was going to be classed
Yes.
by a classification society.
That's
At what point did you realize that it was not going to be classed? Were you told, or did you basically figure it out on your own?
Well, I mean, it was common sense that they weren't going to do it, but officially I was told repeatedly, anytime I said to Stockton or Tony, I'm quite happy dealing with ABS, Lloyds, GL, if we're getting these people in, it's in hand. It's in hand. Engineering are dealing with everything. Now, I knew what they were like. Tony and I had run-ins close on daily basis. At that point, the relationship had broken down with myself and Stockton. In terms of any time I had any issue or my team had any issue and I would report it, I don't know. I maybe came across as the troublemaker within the organisation because I was so outspoken on any issues, you know, in terms of my confidence in the inexperienced engineering team that were employed by OceanGate once they dismissed APL.
So you were the director of marine operations, and Mr. Nissen was the director of engineering.
That's correct.
So not specific to OceanGate, but specific to your previous companies that you worked with.
Yes.
What type of relationship have you had in the past prior to OceanGate with regards to the directors of engineering and as a marine operations?
You have to work hand in hand. In terms of, you know, we work very closely as subpilots, so even on the systems that I work on just now with the designers, even when we are doing any sort of modification to the submersibles under class guidelines and approval and recertification, we work very closely with the designers, with the fabricators of the equipment to make sure the materials that are being used are completely within specification and safe for ourselves and for the operators of these submersibles. So, yeah.
And did you have a relationship like that with the director of engineering at OceanGate?
We never had a relationship. It was the opposite. Yeah, we didn't go on because he didn't like my opinion on his thoughts, his process. More so, even more when the components for Titan, which 80% of were on the submersible that was involved in the incident, they were reused. So yeah, I voiced my displeasure. I say it was quite regular, and I'm sure some of my previous team who left because they weren't happy with the conditions, the way they were being treated by senior management, I'm sure they would back me up on that.
Were you involved in the winding of the first or prototype Titan hull at Spencer Composites?
Not at all.
Were you asked to be part of that process?
Not at all.
Were you involved in the design or construction of any parts of the first Titan hull?
Nothing.
Were you asked to be part of the process?
Initially, when I came across and moved over to the US to work for the organisation, I was meant to be leading the project, not as an engineer, but oversight from an operational background, giving my experience on the components, steering, everything. Basically, the components of the submersible and the operations, how we were actually going to be carrying out the operations. So yeah, I was told a lot of things that never evolved.
And you previously have brought the Ocean Gate Director of Marine Operations in your roles and responsibilities. And I'm going to read, it says, as the Director of Marine Operations for Ocean Gate, Inc., David Lockridge is responsible for ensuring the safety of all crew and clients during submersible and surface operations, for maintaining and operating all marine assets, and for achieving the mission objectives during diverse and challenging submersible expeditions. So as the Director of Marine Operations and the Chief Pilot, what does this mean to you with regards to your obligation and your personal responsibility for the people within that submersible?
Mr. Lockridge, one moment, please.
Yes.
Commander William, what are you reading from there?
That is it was the Ocean Gate website, Director of Marine Operations, and Mr. Lockridge's roles and responsibilities, which was previously inserted as an exhibit from another exhibit that had been pulled,
Was that one there, Mr. Newbear?
which was Exhibit 004 original.
Zero zero four is not in their binders.
Take a 5 minute, take a 2 minute recess.
Yeah, at this time, I'd like to take a 5-minute recess to provide Ocean Gate with a copy of that exhibit. The hearing will reconvene at 10:05.
All right, they had a break, huh? Just got back and they had a break.
which, in all good intentions, it was so that divers, future divers, can see exactly what's happening with the decay and degradation of the hull of the Doria itself. It is a very famous vessel, but deadly. I mean, I don't know today, but at the time, I think there was like 18 deaths on the Doria with technical divers diving on it. Yeah, unfortunately, the CEO decided that he wanted to take it down. I objected, because I know sometimes he could do things to please himself. He told me I was staying out. I objected again. I was sort of reined in at the time. Just remember, I'm the CEO, you're just an employee. I eventually persuaded him to let me come in on the dive, so we reduced the paying passengers down to 3, and Stockton said he was taking it down. The first attempt that we did when we were on the surface, the MS Lars just got blown away with the currents. We did tell him, he wouldn't listen. The vessel captain was very wary about the currents at the time. I tried to give my input in terms of the weather. It's a very exposed area. So we towed the vehicle so that it was in a good position. Stockton took the helm. The controls for Cyclops, it's actually done at the back of the vehicle, and there is camera systems mounted to the, I don't know now, but there was camera systems mounted only to the front, just above the acrylic sphere, the forward viewing dome. And you controlled it on the back with, yes, the PlayStation controller. And when we went to do the dive platform was submerged down to its working depth, 12 feet, 15 feet. Took it down so that it's away from the adverse weather conditions. He attempted to take it off. He didn't do it very well. He ended up bending the dive skids on the bottom, the landing skids, which are usually flat, which contained the drop weights. We deployed diver to verify. And anyway, we got the thumbs up. He departed from the MS Lars at depth, came up to the surface, which we usually did, established main communications with the vessel. And from there, he took it down. I kept saying, please keep your distance. Don't tell me what to do. That was the conversation. He decided to go straight for the wreck. He had on sonar, clear sonar image. You could see the wreck, and boom. As I said, it's not very deep. Visibility's not excellent, but it was clear enough. Good ambient light that day, and he came straight down, hard on the bottom. No trimming, no ballast, nothing. Smash straight down on the bottom. Visibility went everywhere. You could see a silhouette, and it was the 2 clients that were sitting in the viewing dome right next to the acrylic. And they were like, oh my God, we are right on the wreck. So I said to Stockton, please, all stop telling me what to do. Stockton, all stop. We have to see what's going on here. We have to look at our surroundings, which is standard practice for any competent submersible pilot. And from there, visibility cleared. We could see metal plates, and we could clearly see the starboard side of the bow of the Andrea Doria. We could see all the debris, we could see hawser lines, we could see panels coming off. It was an absolute mess. So I said, Stockton, please, and he just kept arguing with me in the sub. Very unbecoming of a submersible pilot. I was trying to guide him, I'm trying to give the best course of action to get him out of it. No matter what, I'm doing this. So he blew air in the tank, and the ballast tank came off the bottom, motored full stick ahead, unbeknownst to everybody else, and I don't know why. He decided to turn the submersible 180 degrees at speed, still coming ahead, so he wasn't looking at his surroundings. He could have quite easily went up into the viewing dome, he could have went up into the tower, because it's got a clear acrylic hatch on there, and he basically drove at full speed into the port side of the bow, and we could hear the cracking of the fairing as he got us jammed in underneath. So I'm not going to say how foul my language was, but it wasn't good. And at that point, it was unprofessional behaviour of him. He started to panic. And the first thing was, do we have enough life support on board? I was like, Stockton, of course we got enough life support. We need to get out here. When do you think the dive team could come to get us out? Stockton, please, give me the controls. I'm going to get us out of this. We're stuck, we're stuck, we're stuck. Repeatedly, every time I went to take the controller from him, he pushed it further and further behind him, inside the submersible itself. I said, I can be quite vocal sometimes. At that point, it went on and on and on. I'm looking up inside the upper hatch. I could see where there was fishing line draping over the top of the sub, all the metal rebar. There was debris everywhere. He never once got out the seat in the back of the sub to go and look at his surroundings. So I said, let's get a communications check. Let's talk to the top side, let them know what's going on. What if there's no comms? I'm like, give me the controls. Let me talk to them. Let me talk to top side, and I'm going to get us out of this. This went on and on and on for a period of time. And eventually it took one of the paying clients to turn round and to university yet. Well then, anytime any of the components would come in, my desk overlooked the loading area where stores would come in. The components would come onto the shop floor before they were taken through to the engineering department. I looked at everything, and there wasn't anything, and I mean anything, on that build, or pre-build, basically when the components were there, that gave me any confidence in them producing an efficient product. Nothing. And as I have reiterated, and I probably will continue to do so, I was very vocal about it to all of them. Every director within the organisation. Owner's wife at the time, I don't know whether she was, all of them. And it didn't help the relationship, but at the end of the day, safety comes first. And anytime you're going in a sub, most important thing is going home safe to your families, not going and making money and pushing the envelope as everybody keeps quoting in the news. It's nothing to do with that. You want to be able to do something safely. Yes, you're taking a risk going down a submersible, but don't take risks that are unnecessary with faulty, and I mean faulty, deficient equipment. And everything that came in had anomalies or deficiencies in the product itself. I wasn't the only one that saw this. There was a lot of people saw every component coming in. Yeah, I was the most vocal.
Recorder, can you please bring up Exhibit 098? Which was the Director of Marine Operations inspection report.
Yep.
Mr. Lockridge, have you ever seen this document?
Absolutely. I made this document, and if you've no objections, would you allow me to read this out?
And what is that?
It is the same, well, sorry, it was the initial cover letter to all the rest of the directors of the company and Stockton Rush, the CEO.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Is that the email that's displayed here, sir?
That is. Okay, so this was sent to all the directors, Tony Nissen included, who was Director of Engineering. With Cyclops 2, Titan, being handed off from engineering to operations in the coming weeks, now is the time to properly address items that may pose a safety risk to personnel. Verbal communication of the key items I have addressed in my attached document have been dismissed on several occasions. So I feel now I must make this report so there's an official record in place. As a Director of Marine Operations, it's my professional opinion that the items noted in my report are significant in nature and must be addressed. I have also included my recommendation to how we should be addressing each issue in the attached quality inspection report. As stated in my employment contract and job description, David Lockridge is responsible for ensuring the safety of all crew and clients during submersible and surface operations. I feel we all have a duty of care as management to all personnel, whether it be staff or mission specialist. Therefore, it is my opinion that until suitable corrective actions are in place and closed out, Cyclops 2, Titan, should not be manned during any of the upcoming trials. My report and the relevant attachments are merely a clear stated record of what I feel should be addressed to allow for successful and safe operations with OceanGate Incorporated. This report was prepared by myself as part of the pending handover of the asset from OceanGate Engineering Team to the Operations Department on the 18th of January 2018.
And when did you begin conducting this inspection?
So, the official report where I started highlighting, I mean, I've been making notes all the way through when this product started appearing, and obviously speaking verbally about it. In terms of the report itself, it was in the January. We had a conversation, myself, Stockton, Tony was there as well, a week to 2 weeks prior to this 18th of January. And Stockton, as you hear on the voice recording, I was asked to inspect Titan before the handover, not do a quality inspection of Titan, which is on the record, on the voice recording of my dismissal, which you all hold and have heard.
What's the difference between an inspection or a quality inspection?
Okay, for me, common sense. If you're asked to inspect something, it gives the person inspecting it the opportunity and the ability to take notes, provide recommendations, their dissatisfaction with anything, and submit that. It's not just a case of scribbling something down on a bit of A4 paper and handing it over. To do an inspection of something, you have to have a record in place. And for me, this was my opportunity, being asked to do it prior to the sub being handed over, and abomination of a sub, but prior to that being handed over, this was my opportunity to raise everything that I had seen during the build and the final build of Titan.
And over the next few minutes, I'm going to ask you to go through the report,
Absolutely.
and we will follow along, which is the same report that you have.
Yeah. Okay, so
And I can guide you through it if you'd like that.
thank you.
So the first component or deliverable you have is the viewport, O-ring, and fasteners.
Yeah. Okay, so the viewport itself. Any other viewports, whether they be small, whatever the design type, everything for those designs is carried out under PVHO guidelines, okay?
Which stands for? Pressure vessel for human
Correct.
occupancy.
There you go. Now, that organisation, it's basically a task group that's formed on US Coast Guard are on that task group, US Navy, ABS, the manufacturers of the viewports themselves. Now, there are so many people on that, and I do have a list of all the committees that are involved in that. Now, this task group are basically, they were developed years ago, I think it was the 90s, and they developed these standards with how pressurized vehicles for human occupancy were designed, built, and operated. So all these people with vast knowledge have fed into this system and set these guidelines. Going back to the viewport, the viewport itself. So the viewport, when it came in, we saw it. I was told it's completely out with of standard design parameters. I was told that when it arrived, which isn't a good sign. On the inspection notes, the viewport was installed by OceanGate Engineering Department prior to this inspection. This is my inspection of 2018. No thorough inspection of the acrylic or the O-ring could be carried out on the inspection day. I was not allowed to be there when all this was being put together. So my corrective action on that was documentation to be issued to the operations department showing completed pressure test results and associated documentation from Hydrospace Group, which is the manufacturer of the acrylic viewport itself. Engineering director has denied my request for those records to be produced. To reiterate on that, as I said, when we go back to the voice recording, which I hope is allowed to be made public knowledge, a 2-hour, 10-minute interview or dismissal interview, they state that the viewport is out with parameters and they quote on other things. For a dome, there was pitting and scoring evident on the dome itself, which is the titanium dome. So on the forward dome ceiling face, okay, and this was the existing dome that was used during, unfortunately, the incident last year, okay, because everything was reused with the exception of the carbon fiber hull. So at the 12 o'clock position, it must be noted that a plunge hole is present. This will create the least path of resistance of seawater on this critical ceiling face. A double dovetail O-ring groove has been machined to captivate the O-ring, yet with the plunge hole, this type of O-ring groove is out with standard design parameters. Now, I know yesterday Mr. Carterson was explaining to you about the machining of these components. Now, the items, would you be able to jump ahead on
We're going to go to
that?
page 7, I believe that is.
Perfect. So the first one is on page 5. If you jump to page 5, this will give the indication. This is still part of my report. So it's this section there.
Go to the next page.
Okay. So image below shows the type of O-ring groove currently machined on both the forward and aft Cyclops 2 Titan dome ceiling faces. Okay. This selection deviates from the standard design process for our application. The addition of this unnecessary plunge hole in both our O-ring grooves also deviates from standard design process. As can be seen on both the images on the next page, the O-rings are not fully captivated due to the plunge hole. And this void on either side creates the potential for the least path of resistance of seawater. In my experience, the potential for this issue will be exacerbated by if we see any sort of buckling of the materials during the immense pressure changes as we go deeper. Now, the reason I put that in is this is the first carbon-hulled, carbon-stroke titanium subsea vehicle ever built to go down with these components on it. And nobody knew what the loading was going to be on this. No computer is going to be able to tell you with those components, no matter what. Nobody knew. So in terms of the O-ring groove itself, as you can see from the images up there, I can't remember how deep the channel was for the O-ring itself, but that type of O-ring groove is a double dovetail. As Mr. Carterson said to you yesterday, that allows the O-ring to be popped into place and it stops it from falling out. The reason that was put onto the forward domes is especially the forward dome on Titan, that was on a hinge, okay? So if they did have an O-ring in there with, say, a single dovetail, they risk running basically the O-ring itself could fall out during manually operated procedures. The one on the aft dome, it had exactly the same in it. It had the plunge hole, which the machining company that dealt with the titanium put in. When this component came into the facility, I was appalled. I had never seen this before. I have dealt with God knows how many O-ring grooves throughout my career, even going back to when I was in the Navy, when I was still a kid. That is wrong.
Were you involved in the design of the forward dome and forward titanium ring?
None of it. None of it. I mean, the concept itself, it was discussed to me on several occasions, and I know the contractors, Tim Catterson and Chris Imes, they would tell us what they were going to do in terms of the mounting of the components. There was always something we would say, why aren't we doing this? Putting stiffening rings in. Why aren't we doing some sort of tensioning device? Because we don't know what's going to happen with these ceiling faces. And they were dismissed on countless occasions by the engineering team and Stockton. And I always voiced my concerns, and I always went to the chief operating officer with this. Yeah, anyway.
And just
Yeah.
for the record, this is on the original first Titan hull, as we previously
It's
discussed.
on the original Titan hull, and it's also on the second hull, which was involved in the incident. They reused these domes, they reused these ceiling faces, they reused the acrylic, they reused the interior. Everything was reused. It's all cost. Now, I wasn't there for that, but I know firsthand everything was reused. And I'm sure that'll all come up as part of the investigation. How the hell they managed to get the carbon removed from segment 1, segment 2, that'll be an interesting topic. So that was on the O-ring grooves. I don't know if you're happy to move on?
I'm happy to move on. If we can move on to the next image,
Yeah.
which
Image.
Okay, so we'll jump onto that one.
what,
Okay.
what are we looking at here, Mr. Lockridge?
So what we're looking at there is this hull was wound under the supervision of Tony Nissen, Stockton Rush. The hull itself, the intent at this point, originally, the hull, when I was involved in the project, was going to be 7 to 10 inches thick. The design decision jumped on, and it was changed to 5 inches thick. That was the thickness of the carbon hull itself, all the way around. These sections that you can see there, now when the hull itself was wound on the mandrel, which OceanGate owned, the carbon was wound on so many layers, couldn't tell you how many, and this impregnated glue that would be applied on at the same time. I'm no carbon fibre expert, but what happened was when the hull came in and the cut-off sections were brought to the unit at Everett, the cut-off sections were the excess from the design overall length of Titan itself. Can't give you a figure. It could have been 3 inches, it could have been 6 inches, it could have been more. And what happened, from memory, it might even have been that, so maybe 5 inches thick. And what happened was these sections of excess came in, the CEO and the engineering director decided that let's chop these up and give them to the clients that have paid to go on the Titanic. Let's give them out to the staff at OceanGate. We were all handed these. 1, 2, yep. Now, when the hull came in, I could see all the imperfections on it. This is one of the samples that I was given by the engineering director, which came from these cut-off sections. And please look at the state of it. There was so many delaminations, so many voids. The imperfections were incredible. There was glue runs everywhere. And that's a red flag, you know? I mean, I did my research at the time. I understand, I don't know how accurate it is, but from my understanding, anybody that's manufacturing anything to do with carbon, they will produce an excess and chop off the excess, okay, so that it's a clean cut. Now, even then, the clean cut that was on Cyclops, the initial hull, 0.1, whatever we're calling it, it was a mess. You could see all the imperfections on it. Now, these samples that you can see up on the board, You can see the cuts, you can see the delaminations. It was so visible. That component itself, I handed off to my attorney when OceanGate decided to sue me because of when I was under the protection of the whistleblower protection scheme with OSHA, which we can go into. And that was proof of why my justification of questioning the feasibility of using a hull that had so many imperfections in it. The image on the right side, on the starboard side there, that is me shining a torch through the back. Now that one section itself, that is a 5-inch section of carbon fibre. That is part of the hull winding, the initial hull. All the way through that, I mean, I just held my torch and took a photograph of one of the sections of the hulls. You could see all the way through it. It was like porous paper. It was disgusting. When I saw this, when I saw the imperfections in the hull itself, I highlighted this repeatedly, and I was constantly put down about it. It'll be fine, the glue will hold it together. Really? So yeah, that's the two images you've got there. That section itself as part of the lawsuit, and after fighting OceanGate for 10 months to try and raise public awareness about this abomination of a submersible, it was destroyed by my attorneys along with their paperwork. Now, the hull itself, you could physically see, I know I may be jumping here, but it's to do with the carbon. The hull itself, this 5-inch thick, you could honestly put micrometers down this, verniers. You can actually feed it down several millimeters. Hope you don't mind me using the metric system for that. Don't know how many thousandths of an inch that is, but you could actually put the thin end of a vernier into some of these holes of this 5-inch thick hull. It was disgusting. Their mitigation, once they glued on the titanium end caps, okay, and we've all seen the gluing video, they were quite vocal about it on social media, the peanut butter. How they mitigated all these holes was they got this company in from Everett, Washington. They took the hull out into the car park at the back of the marina, and they created a pop-up tent and sprayed it with truck bed liner, which I have never seen or heard of in any subsea application in my life. So basically, in the back of your F-150 or your Ram truck, the hardy material that you stand on to stop it getting rusty and scratched, that's what OceanGate engineering team decided to do to stop water getting in through these holes. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm looking at all your faces here that's got the common sense to question this method, especially when it's never been done before. Appalling. Absolutely appalling.
What did that coating do for the outside with regards to the carbon fiber and your ability to conduct a visual inspection of the hull?
You could not. So on the hull itself, I can't remember what they called it, but when they were doing the winding, I'm sure one of the engineers will give you the correct wording for this. There was some sort of green coating that was put over the mandrel, and that material covered the inside of the carbon face itself. Now, when they removed the mandrel, that green, yellowy sort of material, whatever it is, covered the carbon. You couldn't see the carbon. When they stuck on the titanium segments at the end to form the pressure boundary, you couldn't see the end of the carbon anymore, the affected 5-inch surface. And when they applied the truck bed liner, I mean, I don't know how thick they actually applied it on, but you couldn't see the carbon fiber. So that hull could and would never have been able to be inspected by anybody to see any sort of degradation, any potential faults. I mean, like steel or titanium, if you've got a known fault, you can see it, you can NDT it. They decided not, as I said, to do NDT, sorry, jumping. But yeah, the materials they used for this, you wouldn't be able to inspect that carbon fiber. And for me to highlight all those visible issues, and you'd be naive not to say they were not visible, they dismissed me and said they were going ahead with it. And they had already booked clients for that mission in 2018. They were going ahead with us.
Was this report provided to the board of directors?
So I asked for it to be provided to the board of directors. I spoke to Bonnie about it. Unfortunately, from my understanding was I submitted it, and I didn't do it out of badness. I didn't do it for any ulterior motive. I did this so that all my voice concerns were put down on paper, and so that they could actually go, wow, I can see where he's coming with this. There's a lot of things on this report that could affect the integrity of this hull. A lot of things. From the out of standard viewport, from the just everything. I mean, I know I sent you the images of last week, and I don't know whether they'll be on the system, but it was the ballast system. I mean, there's just so many. Excuse me a second. I don't know if you've got them on. I'm happy.
We
if they're
have them
not.
we have them embedded into an exhibit.
No problem at all.
So-
But if you don't mind, can I discuss them?
In just 1 second, we'll bring the exhibit up so everybody can see.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
91?
It'll be exhibit 91. I think it's Titan Systems. And if you could scroll to the pages that I had stated. Mr. Lockridge,
Yeah.
what is the image to the far right? that
So
you're
the
looking at?
image that I've got, oh, sorry, to the,
Sorry.
right, okay, so, Stockton.
It's on page 9 of the exhibit.
I will say it, Stockton like to do things on the cheap, okay? There was obviously cost implications, there was a lot of investment went into this, but that image that you're looking at on the right-hand side is Stockton's idea of a scrubber unit.
Recorder, can you please zoom in on that?
Now,
What is the purpose of a scrubber?
okay, so to maintain the atmosphere inside a manned submersible, what we've got is we've got small cylindrical drums, and we put a chemical in there called soda sorb. Now what happens is, to maintain those submersibles at atmospheric pressure so that you don't see an overpressure, what we do is as you're breathing out, the carbon dioxide is absorbed into this product, and what you've got to do is you've got to top up the oxygen content. That allows the atmosphere to be controlled. Okay, so you're not bringing additional air into the chamber itself. If you were to do that, you would overpressurize from the internal. So like, the easiest way to describe it is technical divers, where what they'll do is they will breathe out, it's absorbed into the CO2 absorbent, and because of that, there's no bubbles come up. And then what they'll do is they'll apply oxygen. Same principle for manned submersibles as well, and they all use this. Stockton decided not to go down the route of using a known manufacturer. As I said, one of the contract companies that I work for, James Fisher Defence, they also own Divex. They design, build for hyperbaric chambers, manned submersibles, properly built CO2 scrubbers. So that
When was this picture taken?
That was taken from memory. It may have been 2017. May have been 2017. In fact, I think it was 2017 because at the end because they wanted myself and a couple of individuals to do a test of it. Now, as you can see, it's a plastic tote from Home Depot, still got the labelling on it, and a fan from a PC, a computer. He wanted to do a test on it. I obliged just to humour him, and we did that in the sub, and it didn't work. I don't know if they used this contraption inside Titan. You would need to speak to somebody that was involved afterwards. But during 2017 and the start of 2018, when I was there, that was his intent, to use that device.
Thank you. And the next image?
Okay, so the next image here is,
If you could describe.
yeah,
It's the high-pressure air variable ballast tank.
correct, if that's what you want to call it. We'll call it that loosely. This bag itself was, I don't know if this was on Titan or not, but this was meant to be the system that was going on there.
Next page.
That's okay, I'll wait until it's up.
Keep going. The one I told.
Can you give the page number that you're referencing there?
Oh, it's my own notes.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying. Wait, if it's not up, it's
It is, I have it. We just have to get to the, there we
No
go.
worries. There you go.
Variable ballast system.
Okay.
So it'll be the,
So the system on the port side on the left, I don't have images of that. That was not taken by myself. That was, I'm sure I saw that in the media. That may have been done during one of the expeditions.
zoom into the image on the right.
Okay. So the image on the right, which I hold in my hand, the cream-coloured bag that you can see on the right-hand side, this was the ballast bag to assist with positive buoyancy. This was the intent. I know Mr. Carterson discussed it yesterday. The design of Titan was to eject these drop weights that would allow them to get neutral trim, and then once they'd finished the dive, eject more. That will give them positive buoyancy to return to the surface. As another form of achieving positive buoyancy, they decided, this was Scott Griffith and Stockton Rush, and they decided to use this Coast Guard. It's an old fueling bag from the Coast Guard. Don't know where they purchased it from. And they manufactured this, rigged this up. I mean, it had to be cleaned out. It was still full of fuel. And the intent for this was to provide additional buoyancy to the submersible itself, okay, using high pressure air. The black hose that you can see coming off the bag itself, this was from, no, this is comical, shop vac, okay? So in the UK we call it a hoover. This was glued onto the bag itself. The orange line that you can see coming off of the shop vac hose, their intention was when the hose is in the down position, the air will be trapped inside the bag, allowing the bag to be full, allowing them to achieve positive buoyancy. When they wanted to vent the bag without dropping their drop weights to start going down on a dive, they would, and I'll jump on to the next, if that's okay.
Hold on just one second.
Yep, no problem.
Let me grab the page for the recorder. That would be page 15 of the exhibit. And it will be the top left picture. Or if you could just zoom out a little bit. And Mr. Lockridge, what are we seeing in that top left picture?
Okay, what you see in the top left picture, the orange line that you saw coming down from the shop vac hose, which would allow the bag to vent or trap the air once the high pressure air was applied to the bag itself. This was controlled, this was built by Stockton Rush in his garage at home. This is an old fishing reel winding system. I'm not a fisherman, so I'm sure somebody will be able to correct me on this. But he rigged this up, and it was on a motor, so he could send a signal to this winder, this fishing reel system, filled inside a oil-filled container. And this would allow that orange line that you saw in the previous image to move the shop vac hose up and down. That's what that was. That was rigged up, not classed, not approved by anybody. Yeah. I wasn't impressed.
Were these images part of your report?
No, and the reason being is when I did the report, there are other items that, we can talk about today or have came to mind, over the last 6.5 years, 7 years now, since my termination. There was so much I could have put into that report that would have genuinely looked like I was pointing the finger at the CEO, and that it wasn't my intent. I didn't want to lose my job. I wanted to go to Titanic, it was on my bucket list. I wanted to dive this, but to dive it safely. Because of the tangent the organisation went off on, there were so many things that could have been in my report. These images, I genuinely, in preparation for this hearing, I wish I'd had them to last year's hearing where we spoke, about the incident itself last September. I found these, and they weren't to my attorney, they were to this is my previous attorney from last year. It was from, 2018 attorney during the lawsuits and the involvement with OSHA. I stumbled across it, and that's why I sent you that through. I just thought it prudent that you should have these images. So no, they were not, sorry for rambling, they were not part of my report at the time. I'd completely forgotten about them. Completely forgot about them.
So now, in January, you complete the report.
Correct.
And once the report is complete, what was your next step at that point?
To send it out. I'd been discussing with the only trainee pilot I had at the time was Bonnie, who you spoke with yesterday. I spoke with her. I said, look, I am going to be submitting this report. She was there when Stockton had asked me the previous week or 2 weeks before to do an inspection of Titan before the imminent handover. So I discussed it with her. I got her to proofread it. She's like, wow. And I sent it straight out to them all. And obviously with the cover letter that I read out, a few minutes ago, there's no way I was signing off in this. I knew during 2017 when all these materials came in, there's no way at that point I was signing off in this. Aside from Titan, as I said, I had Antipodes, I had Cyclops, I had the maintenance, the daily operations of that. My team, as it was going, was getting thinner and thinner. People were dropping away from OceanGate. Their turnover was incredible. So yeah, I was finding myself with a smaller and smaller team at that time. So yeah, Bonnie was the one that I spoke to about it, and then I submitted the document and sent it out to them all.
With regards to the turnover that you mentioned,
yeah,
why was there such a turnover? Did they discuss that with you, why they were leaving the company?
My team would. Give you one incident. When we did Mr. Carterson was there. When we did the dive on Alcatraz, on the way back out, we were going out underneath the Golden Gate Bridge, and we just passed it. Tow line snapped. I was in the shower at the time on the ship because I'd just been in the water, putting the bottom plates on the MS Lars.
Did you say the tow line?
The tow line, correct, for the launch and recovery system with Cyclops on board. At that point, sorry, sir, can you just repeat the question just so I don't go off on one? Sorry.
Gladly. You had mentioned earlier that your operations department was beginning to dwindle and you were losing employees.
Thank you. One of the instances was when we eventually managed to tow the asset back in to San Francisco late in the evening. The CEO, in the presence of, I remember the Guillermo was there, who you're going to be interviewing. Wendy Rush was there. There was 2 board members there. Joe Perry was there. Tim Carterson and myself were on the MS Lars. I think he might have been driving the Zodiac at the time, bringing this back in with the vessel that we were using to assist with the operations itself. It was a long day. Took quite a while to recover the asset itself prior to it. It could have potentially crashed into the rocks. It could have potentially crashed into the Golden Gate Bridge. I don't know why. I can surmise. The CEO, Stockton, was watching from afar everything that was going on. Somebody on the ship had let him know that this was happening. We towed it back in, and Alexandra Russell, she was the one that was communicating with him on the phone, and I was close by, and he was shouting and screaming at her on the phone, trying to give us, simple thing, trying to give us directions into what marina we were supposed to take the asset and bring the asset alongside. And this screaming was unbelievable. When we got on the dock, I tied up the MS Lars, tied up alongside. At this point, Alexandra was already out the boat. Mr. Carterson may remember this at the time, but the CEO was shouting and screaming in Alex's face. And it wasn't long after. It was disgusting. I was the only one that actually spoke up, and I did have a lot to lose, I did. I brought my whole family across to the US. I had to watch how I said it. Sometimes I could be quite vocal, but I was the only one that kind of calmed them down. She left. That was one of our main reasons for that. Isabel Johnson, she ended up leaving. She had her own reasons. That incident affected her as well. At that point, I had nobody directly working under me. I had Scott Griffiths, who ended up becoming, because I was too vocal on the project itself, he ended up becoming my superior. I think he ended up being the director of quality assurance, I think it was, for Titan. I was losing people hand over fist. We had an ex-Coast Guard employee that came in, and I remember there was one of the dives, Matt, I forget his second name just now, he was an ex-petty officer with the Coast Guard. We brought him in to help assist with topside operations. And example with Matt, he was topside, he was driving the towboat. I was underwater on a job at the time, diving off Seattle. Came back up, Matt told me his displeasure. He had arguments with the chief operating officer and the CEO about how they wanted things to be ran topside. Matt was concerned with safety aspect of things. He came to me, I'm his direct superior. I go to them, and I was dismissed. So at that point, after Matt leaving, that was critical in me, apart from the standard, a self-help plan, outside help plan, incident reports, stuff like that. It was safety critical reports on anything, especially in my team, highlighted during their tenure with the company. So I would basically produce these documents and I would submit them to the chief operating officer, which would voice my concern on the way things were handled, especially when I wasn't there, I'm underwater, they were topside. And it was distressing for me seeing people like that, people with experience. An individual from the Coast Guard, years and years of experience. I think Matt was a petty officer at the time. It was upsetting for me. I'm sure none of them will say anything negative about me. If they do, they do. But I I would like them to give their reasons on why they left. The terminal, I didn't know this, but the Ocean Gates had hundreds of people on the books. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. They were letting people go hand over fist for whatever reason, raising concerns. Yeah, it was concerning.
You had mentioned an incident reporting system.
Yes.
Was that part of OceanGate policies and procedures?
So, if you have no objections, and I'm just going to read something from you may have it, you may not, the OceanGate Health and Safety manual. And if you don't mind, can I just read a portion of that? I don't have the whole manual.
Can you tell me what page it is on the manual? We do have the manual as an exhibit.
Near the beginning.
Hold on just one second, Mr. Lockridge.
No problem at all.
Yeah, I know. I'll find it. What page, sir?
Pardon?
Do you know what page it's on?
No.
Okay.
If you just give me a sec, I'll try and find
Yes,
it.
sir.
Sorry about that.
Lieutenant Steele, what exhibit is that? Okay, let the record show that's Exhibit 27.
Other binder. Mr. Lockridge, we also have the Health, Safety, and Environmental Manual from OceanGate
Sure.
in the binder under exhibit number 27.
Number 27.
Yes, Ocean Gate?
We have the cover page of that exhibit here. It's dated 2019, so I'm not certain if that's the same document that Mr. Lockridge is referencing,
Yeah, it won't be.
given the timing.
Correct.
Okay, so
I was just going to verify which one he had, whether it
Yeah.
was the same or not. And
this is a good time to take a recess to align exhibits. We will reconvene at 11:05. This hearing is now back in session. Before we continue with the questioning, for the record, I want to note that the paragraph from the Health and Safety and Environmental Manual Mr. Lockridge is referencing has no material differences from Exhibit 27, which is dated in 2019. However, other portions of Exhibit 27 may have been updated since the document that Mr. Lockridge is reading was produced. Commander Wellen?
Thank you. Mr. Lockridge, prior to the break, you wanted to read a reference with regards to Coast Guard incident policies, procedures?
Yeah, this is to do with OceanGate's health and safety manual, which was in place prior to me starting the company, which I looked over. I just want to make reference to some of the comments. This is a statement made by Stockton Rush. OceanGate Incorporated, in fulfilling its legal obligation and its moral responsibility to provide a place of employment free from recognised hazards, has set forth this HSE policy statement, reinforcing its commitment to maintaining a safe and healthy work environment. This HSE policy statement is the cornerstone of the company's HSE management process. It is communicated openly and at every opportunity to employee, customers, vendors, and subcontractors, and has equal status with other primary business objectives. Violations of this policy should be immediately brought to the attention of management. The OGI HSE philosophy is that in the performance of our work, the health and welfare of the people involved and the protection of assets and the environment are the primary concern. No job is so important that we cannot take the time to do it safely. That wasn't the case. I just wanted to go on record to state that. This was a policy that was in place. Basically, on that, it showed open door policy. You get any issues. This was discussed with me at the start of my employment. That it is an environment, safe environment to work in, and everybody is approachable if you have got any issues. It was so incorrect. It was untrue. The whole thing. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate on that from their HSE manual. That was OceanGate.
And is that from your own experience for you not to be able to approach or bring up safety concerns, or was that from the experience of other operations people that you managed?
So in terms of external to OceanGate, everywhere that I've worked, whether it's been from underwater inspection, when I was working as a construction diver, inspection diver, sub-pilot, there is always the ability to be able to actually sit down, whether it's during a job, after a job, pre-job, and discuss issues relevant to the safety and well-being of individuals, whether it be myself or somebody else that's going to be put in a position of imminent danger. This statement made it look as though it was open book policy. You have an issue, you could report it to senior management. I reported everything I possibly could to prevent senior management from going ahead and actually producing what they produced.
And so you have the 25 to 30 years of subsea submersible operations experience. Throughout those 25 years, it was the industry standard to be able to come forward as a submersible pilot to express your concerns with regards to safety.
That is correct. And even if it was a at the start of a new build for a new submersible, you can go to the designers, you can go to the project engineers, the project managers, the operations manager, whoever were running the project. You would sit down periodically and do tabletops on any form of component that was going onto the sub, what they think should be added, what should be taken off. It was, everybody would have been involved in those discussions. You know, there was maybe just a handful of times with other organizations where you would come along, you would have a look, you had a finished product. As a submersible pilot, a diver, it is your right to demand to get information on something where you are putting yourself at risk. And it's to basically mitigate, you know, potential for disaster. So anyway, with regards to OceanGate, I approached them on everything, every little thing from boat operations. Anytime we had issues, I would formally put them down if there was an incident, slips, trips, falls, any sort of incident, trapped fingers, everything was handed off to senior management. So there was a record in place. In terms of kickback, you know, on changing operations to the way that I would see fit with all my experience, eventually with some things they would buckle and they would basically allow me to do them my way, and it would show them that it's the safest method. When I went along to the company, you know, they were towing the dive platform out with a Bayliner sports boat, you know, until they went ahead and got the ex-Coast Guard vessel. The company, in my mind, even when I went across, was in its infancy. Even although it had been on the go since 2009, they had certain policies in place, and the reason I wanted to say this, to show they were highly inaccurate. So, yeah.
And so when you created the inspection report in 2017,
Yeah.
was your intention of delivering the report to Stockton Rush and Tony Nissen?
It was to highlight it to everybody. Everybody that's on that, they knew my displeasure in the components. They knew my dissatisfaction. They knew. I mean, as I said, I wasn't allowed into, like, I got told this, I'm not allowed to go into the board meetings because we know you will open your mouth. You know, it was things like that. I'm not shy when it comes to safety. If I don't agree with it, as I said, put it down in writing, submit it, and, you know, everywhere else I've worked, it would be addressed. It would be addressed at the highest level. I mean, on occasions, it wouldn't even reach that level where it has to go at the highest level. It's something that the ops team would deal with in-house, and corrective actions were put in place in operations manuals and standard procedures. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of reporting, I would report everything. My team, you know, as I said, it would get whittled down to next to nothing. We would report everything. Through me, I would submit that to senior management, and it was all held by them.
So what happened when you submitted this report to the senior management?
So when I submitted the report to senior management, I got a message to say that there was a meeting in the boardroom at Everett at the facility, and yeah, that meeting turned out to be a 2-hour, 10-minute discussion on my termination and how my disagreements with the organisation with regards to safety didn't matter.
And who was involved in this meeting?
So at the meeting, there was Scott Griffiths.
I'm going to
who
prove to you guys
ended up being
100%
quality manager
Fahrenheit for
Titan.
7 days. Then it was pulled out and no cycle time was
Bonnie Carroll.
too vertical, too horizontal. 96 hours for a
And
crew
throughout
of
the
5
meeting, did they
to
ask you
tab.
for your
Don't know what the
line
hell
on
it
these
is, but I
concerns?
know what I read.
Most of the talking, I mean, as I said, I hope this entire recording becomes public knowledge and it's allowed to be played. It would be very beneficial in everybody hearing the disregard for safety and disregard for advice. But I mean, during this, they highlighted so many things. The viewport, you know, basically the quote on it during the dismissal. As I said, you've all got copies of this and you've all heard it. Stockton, and I will quote, "I will tell you what the acrylic is according to Will. He says the acrylic won't work at all." Why did he say that? Because he wants to sell us another one. He had more acrylic and he said, why don't you buy one like this? Because that will make it to 4,000 metres.
Mr. Lockridge, I just want to make sure, what are you reading from?
That's basically, I've just done bullet points from my dismissal interview, which you've all heard.
Yeah, I don't, Ocean Gate, have you heard that recording or dismissal interview? I don't, we don't have it in the record, so, yeah, I don't, at this time, I didn't.
Summarize.
Yeah, I think, can you just summarize your experience from that meeting, sir? And because we're not going to be able to enter that as an exhibit in the
No,
record.
absolutely. No, I understand completely. Just for me, I mean, I've just taken bullet points from it. You know, I mean, I know it's probably going to upset a few people, but I will quote, "It doesn't just implode, it screams like a mother before it implodes." Now, for the CEO to say that in front of other people, right, regarding that carbon fibre, I'm putting that on the record, and I know you've all heard it. It's disgusting, it's appalling, total disregard for safety, not even just for himself, but for everybody else. Didn't care. Engineering department, they didn't care. So during that meeting, myself and Bonnie, for the first time, we discovered, because I mean, I had been pushing for the PVHO paperwork and pressure test information for the viewport. And it was constantly refused, as you'll hear on this voice recording, which I hope Ocean Gate's attorneys do get a hold of as well, because it's certainly eye-opening. The viewport manufacturer states that the viewport is only good for about 1,000 metres. I'll take everything with a pinch of salt in terms of what the media are saying. There's been reports that he is now saying it was only good to 650 metres. I don't understand why it was ever produced. You know, I mean, it's somebody that's going along the lines of PVHO, but I'm sure that'll all come out, the understanding behind that. With regards to the hull, the Tony and Stockton kept reiterating about the acoustic monitoring system, how that will basically give them the status of the hull. It will give them baselines on what is going on in the hull, which I completely disagreed with. All it's going to do is actually give you indication when you've got another strand breaking within the component itself. I voiced my displeasure during that meeting about the lack of NDT, the discussion about getting it classed. You know, all that came up, and myself and Bonnie were completely dismissed. You know, that way, with everything I'd raised in the report, they had an excuse, they had an answer, and not one of them gave me any confidence, not one of them. You know, from cathodic protection to nothing. It was a disgrace.
Going into that meeting, were you confident that they would accept your concerns?
It'd have been naive of me not to think he was going to do something to me for doing this. I mean, I knew how Stockton would fly off the handle. I didn't do it out of badness. This report, I was asked to do it. Now, if it had been a case of the report, I hadn't been asked to do an inspection of it, I would have done one. You know, I mean, that built Titan sub was weeks away from getting handed off to myself. And through that whole build process, seeing all those components, I was appalled. So either way, whether I did a report on the 18th of January or whether I did a report, say it was March, it was going to be ready, whatever, I would have, on paper, put down my concerns because I was dismissed on every single occasion from Chief Operating Officer, CEO, even the media and marketing manager. All of them, engineering director, a lot of them. The only other director that agreed with me on my concerns was Bonnie. That was it. And she's got limited experience, you know. I mean, she had such good potential for being a pilot, you know, a future pilot, and such good confidence and, you know, dexterity and stuff like that. But like, the thing is, even prior to my dismissal in this 2-hour, 10-minute termination interview, the contractors that were working for me, Tim Catterson and Chris Imes, voiced their concerns. You heard Tim yesterday state to you that he would never get in that sub. Chris told him he would never get in that sub. Now, Tim's probably got 30, 40 years of experience in subs. Chris Imes ran Delta submarines for 20 plus years. You know, at one point he'd probably done more dives than anybody else in the industry. They refused to dive the sub. They voiced their concerns. It wasn't just me. Other people did, and they were dismissed. They were dismissed by Tony. They were dismissed by the CEO. They were dismissed by the CEO, which make a mockery of this HSE statement that, you know, working in a safe environment where everything is reportable to senior management.
Did you make concerns to Mr. Rush about operating the submersible and moving forward in the upcoming testing?
Absolutely. So the main thing with the integrity of the hull, jumping on before we go into the diving, the whole thing with it being classed, the submersible was meant to be classed. Part of that classification process is to do unmanned pressure testing of not only the viewport, which should be designed, you know, under the PVHO guidelines, but the hull itself, you know, taking it to 1 1/4 its max operating depth, pressurizing that. There's cycles that you use in these pressure pots. And that's the thing, Stockton had been in communication with, I know this is the first hull, but he'd been in communication with the test facility, and then they decided that they were going to charge too much money, so that's why he decided not to do it at that time. All those concerns were highlighted by myself. It has to be done properly. I would never have got in that thing. I will be completely, hands up, from the get-go. Tony Nissen, engineering director, gave me zero confidence in a product that I personally was supposed to be the chief pilot for or have under my care as a director of marine operations. Hands down, I would never go in that thing. And I wouldn't have. I really wouldn't have. And I wouldn't have encouraged anybody to go in it. And I think that's why I was quite vocal on the shop floor. Anytime any of my trainees were involved in anything, you know, whether they were asked to go and help the engineering team to go and help put a component on it, I would voice my concerns to every single one of them. And as I said, they all whittled out. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody.
So with regards to the Deep Ocean Test Facility,
Yeah.
had they gone to would a test at the Deep Ocean Test Facility give the hull a little validity in your eyes?
Not validity, but it would. There was so many imperfections in that first hull. As I said, and I'll reiterate and go back to seeing the external of the hull before they even, you know, before they applied this truck bed liner on the top. So many holes in it. That thing was not going to pass. If they'd have taken that over pressure, it would have failed. It would have, hands down. I could put money on it. It was a mess.
What did they say it was rated to?
4,000 meters.
And was that based upon a test or a previous test or testing procedure?
That was based on Tony Nissen's calculations. Engineering Department, Ocean Gate.
Prior to your termination, were you consulted on the future test procedures and policies for the Titan?
So I gave them advisories. Stockton was insistent that he wanted to go in it for manned testing when they were taking the Titan to the Bahamas. I obviously voiced my displeasure. You'll have heard my comment in there saying, you know, about the accident investigation teams will get involved.
Can you summarize what you stated?
Yeah, basically, so my the only way to get him to see any sense, I knew that hull would fail. As I said, it was an absolute mess. I suggested to them, look, why don't you, if you've decided that you're not going to go ahead and take it to the pressure chamber and get it overpressurized, put it on a line, take it down, bring it back up again, but put your strain gauges on it. You know, all this acoustic monitoring that they were talking about. Put all that on the sub, take it down unmanned, keep doing multiple tests and bring it up. As I said, it was the only way. If I'd have said from the outset, I don't know. I mean, in hindsight, I knew he would have let me go. I knew he was going to let me go for the way I was being anti-project at that point. So whatever I suggested, it wasn't taken on board. None of it was taken on board, which is unfortunate.
Do you think the testing or the manned testing of that submersible, how do you think that would, if it would have, or how would that have affected the submersible industry?
If it had imploded with people in it, do you mean?
During the testing facility, where you had made the recommendation to do unmanned testing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
For him to go down in that solo
Yeah.
as a testing, how would that have affected, as you stated in your statement?
Nobody else does it. This is a one-off. This project's a one-off. Nobody else would allow that.
So manned testing isn't a type of testing in the industry?
The hull would have to be pressure tested first to ensure the concept and the build of the submersible. Nobody's going to put anybody inside a submersible and take it down to depth without doing proper testing. Triton submarines, I know Patrick's coming along next week. He'll tell you how it's done. They send the hulls off for pressure testing prior to building the components up and shipping them out to their clients.
So just to confirm, for the first Titan hull, the
Yep.
testing plan was to do manned testing.
That's what Stockton wanted. After he changed his mind about getting it classed, which would provide oversight on the testing procedure itself. That's the thing. They came away from class, and doing that, the whole project just went in a completely different tangent. There was no safeguards put in place. There was none of them knew what was going to happen. You'll hear that in the voice recording as well. You know, I state, you have no baseline for that vehicle. You don't know what's going on with it. And dismissed, as usual, dismissed constantly.
Did he understand the risks do you believe that he understood the risks for manned test diving?
Like, I think without actually saying anything, people know my opinion on Rush. His decisions, this was an ego boost for him. To go and do that manned and then follow it up with, and I know the individual's coming next week, Carol Stanley in it, who will describe that testing done in the Bahamas. I think hearing it from them firsthand, because I was away, the desire to do it manned, nobody's going to be affected. That's what he kept saying. Of course they're going to be affected. If you put somebody in an unpressure tested, uncertified vehicle and take it down and there's an incident, you know yourself, the accident investigation team would be down on everybody. And it would be harmful not only to the families of the individuals that go in the sub, which he ended up doing, but it just affect the rest of the industry itself. You know, fortunately, everybody else follows the guidelines classification. They'll listen to experience and they talk amongst themselves with all these task groups. PVHO get involved, ABS, Lloyds, GL, everything's done properly. Stockton went off on a tangent. The engineering department went off on a tangent. What for? To prove a point.
So after voicing your concerns over many months, and then through your report, your inspection report, and then following your 2-hour and 10-minute meeting,
That's correct.
what happened the next day?
So I was told that day that's us, we're finished, as you'll hear on the recording. So I was terminated. And then the chief operating officer, who I still don't understand why the individual running the organisation was not present in the meeting. He was actually in the building at the time. I don't understand why Neil wasn't there. To this day, I just don't understand. Was he told not to? I don't know. I'd love to know why. I was dismissed. I was emailed, no more correspondence, and I was emailed this letter saying that Stockton and I were at an impasse. So basically, we didn't agree on the way the organisation was going with how I think and know how it should have been done properly. I'm not saying I know everything about engineering. I'm not a degree qualified engineer. I've worked as an engineering technician. I've worked on mechanical systems, diving systems. I've been doing it a very long time. You know, I mean, I was signed up to join the Navy in the late 80s. You know, even when I worked in the manufacturing industry, you develop, I would say, common sense. So you know what's right and you know what's wrong. And if you're questioning something before you put yourself at risk, go to others and get a second opinion. They didn't follow that path, which is unfortunate. So, yeah.
In your opinion, what do you believe was the impasse?
He had to dive it. Now, I don't know whether it was a financial thing. He had to dive that year. I mean, that was the intention. There was clients lined up for 2018. They were booked. As far as I know, they were booked out for that summer. So how that's feasible, having a sub like that, a build quality like that, and then for these people that are running this organisation to think it's okay to put these people at risk. It's...
And these were paying passengers?
All of them? Yeah, all of them. Yeah. Yep.
And this was for Titanic Expedition 2018?
Correct.
Commander Whelan, I think it's important to clarify, when you say paying passengers, that was the plan, but for the Titan prototype, I don't believe there were any passengers carried in this prototype vessel. So I just want to clarify, Mr. Lockridge, that when you say passengers for hire or mission specialists, that was the plan, but you never saw that occur for the prototype hull.
That is correct. Before that thing even saw rainwater falling on it, I was away. I had nothing to do with any of the operations manuals, anything. I had nothing to do with it at that point, which was alarming, which is why I followed the path I decided to do, so that to protect public safety, I went down the OSHA route.
So, just so for the record, so when you departed,
Yep.
when you were terminated in January of 2018,
Correct.
what was the condition of the first Titan?
It was, in terms of the build itself,
In terms of the build itself, was it
They-
operational? Was it had to be?
the only component that they were waiting on was a carbon fiber high pressure air cylinder, which was going to be mounted to the underside of the submersible. And I think they were waiting on the second Continue battery, which is the external battery to provide power for the submersible itself. From memory, that's all they were waiting on.
So once you were terminated,
Yeah.
what did you do next?
Can I relate to my notes?
You can relate to your notes. We just asked that we be provided a copy of your notes after.
Absolutely, no problem. Okay. So, now the timeline I have previously given yourselves, and it was just that was basically a timeline of my employment with the organisation and where I was at with OSHA. You okay if I relate
you
to
can
that? Yeah,
And then
thank
what
you.
we'll do, it is not as an exhibit You
Yeah.
can read through what you've prepared, which is just your notes, and then you'll provide it to us. And
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, so when I was fired, I'm obviously, well, not just concerned for myself and my family, you know, what are we going to do now? But I didn't want anybody going in that submersible. I mean, it was dangerous. You know, as I said, the build quality was atrocious. So I spoke to Labour and Industries, and that was within a week of my termination. I'm just going to relate to my notes. Okay, so I was terminated on the 19th of January. On the 6th of February, after dealing with Labour and Industries, I had a formal conversation with OSHA. Okay, that was the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Okay, in the UK we call it HSE. They are the governing bodies that deal with health and safety issues in the workplace. They also coordinate with the US Coast Guard with regards to seafarers. So I informed OSHA. I did a call and emails with Tobias Kramer, I think it is. He was the Assistant Regional Administrator for OSHA that were based in Seattle. He decided at that point my issues and my concerns about public safety, about the public going in the submersible, were serious enough that he wanted me, he said it to me, I knew nothing about this, to be put and placed under the whistleblower protection scheme. So I spoke to one of the individuals that dealt with the whistleblower protection scheme, and I did a formal interview process to be enrolled into that scheme on February the 8th, 2018. I did an intake interview. We did many calls with each other, emails, obviously see when we were got. Now, obviously being a seafarer and working for an organisation that's got marine assets, between myself and OSHA determined that I am a seafarer to allow the Coast Guard to get involved. That was on February 23rd, 2018. So by February the 28th, Bonnie Carroll, who you spoke to yesterday, she quits her job, citing my safety concerns in a resignation letter.
her job at Ocean Gate.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So because OSHA had decided that my concerns were serious enough for public safety and for the employees of Ocean Gate, you know, I mean, no matter what, as much as I didn't get on with Stockton, I wouldn't want to see anybody dying for the sake of going in a sub. It's a magical place. I love it. I'm very passionate about what I do. If there's risk like that, don't do it. You know, everybody wants to go home to their families. So at that point, Ocean Gate sends a letter to Ocean Gate and they formally inform the Coast Guard about my complaint, about my concerns. I do have all my documentation and my correspondence with OSHA on that, but one thing I would like to go on the record and provide to yourself, which is available just now on the OSHA website. I just want to put it into perspective as a seafarer, how OSHA determined under the Whistleblower Protection Scheme I was protected under the Seafarers Protection Act. So on the OSHA fact sheet, which I will give to yourselves, and I've highlighted key areas of it, okay, filing whistleblower complaints under the Seamen's Protection Act. Covered employees. The Seamen's Protection Act, SPA, prohibits persons from retaliating against seamen for engaging in certain protected activities pertaining to compliance with maritime safety laws and regulations. Protected activity. A person may not discharge or in any other manner retaliate against a seaman because the seaman, and I've got these highlighted for yourself so it's on the record, refused to perform duties because of a reasonable apprehension of serious injury to the seaman, other seamen, or the public, if the seaman has first requested that their employer correct the dangerous condition. So going by OSHA's guidelines, And they confirmed, obviously, all my experience and documentation, which I gave to OSHA. They confirmed, and that's why they took me seriously. At that point, they put me under the whistleblower protection scheme. I can't remember offhand, there's like 40 different levels from different industries. So, jumping on to the same component, which is all relative to the lawsuit that OceanGate took out against me. So, unfavourable employment actions. A person may be found to have violated SPA, Seamen's Protection Act, if the seamen's protected activity was a contributing factor in the person's decision to take an unfavourable employment action against the seaman. An unfavourable employment action, and I'll give the examples, firing or laying off, which happened. During the lawsuit, which OSHA were totally up to date on, intimidation or harassment, which was very public, which I know everybody's seen the lawsuit, it's available online. Making threats, which they did to me and my family. Blacklisting, intentionally interfering with an employee's ability to obtain future employment. And last but not least, which is controversial, reporting the employee to the police or the immigration authorities. I had a good reason for being under the Seamen's Protection Act with OSHA. They deemed and approved it. That's why they passed everything to the Coast Guard. Yeah. So I've obviously got all my correspondence with OSHA here, which coincides with my timeline of everything which I'd already submitted to you. Would you like me to go into more detail on everything that we communicated with OSHA and how OSHA communicated with myself?
Yes.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'll just...
Would you like to take a little break?
Can we take 5? Is that possible?
The hearing will recess and reconvene at 11:57.
Thank you.
I'm trying to find the report of the Ocean Gate, where it shows that he bared his ass. Now, this witness stated that he knew he was going to be sacked. He thought he was going to be sacked, so he knew that there was an issue with his behavior, his communication.
I avoided the mirror. I felt alone for a long time.
I'll try to find it. Give me time.
What's good to watch, read?
We're just waiting. It's on commercial break. We're just waiting.
The hearing is now back in session. Commander Whalen.
Mr. Lockridge, please continue with your discussion.
Okay, so with regards to the communications with OSHA, the timeline, so for the record, I was under the whistleblower protection scheme for 10 months trying to stop OceanGate from doing what they did. And I'm just going to read through everything in terms of notes and communications with OSHA. Okay, so and I can give you a copy of this. This is OSHA paperwork that was sent to myself and to OceanGate's attorneys. It's basically the case activity worksheet. This is just to let OceanGate know that the OSHA were putting me under the whistleblower protection scheme because of the Seamen's Protection Act. So on the allegation summary, which came from OSHA, and that was issued by Paul McDevitt, on or about January 23rd, 2018, Mr. Lockridge was discharged in retaliation for raising safety concerns about the development and testing of a submersible marine vessel. So that's just to put on record, I was under their care at that point. This is after I'd done my intake interview for the whistleblower protection scheme. So jumping on, I do the intake interview. I give them everything. I gave them the safety report. I gave them photos. I gave them as much information as I possibly could. The next instance, where is it? Do apologize. I'm just going to have a look through this. Okay, so the next instance after the Coast Guard are informed of my complaint, because OSHA took it seriously, that was on February 23rd, and I've got the correspondence for that. The next thing is Bonnie. Bonnie quits, citing my safety concerns and hers, and I informed OSHA of that. Just to let, for the record, and this is all on email, just an update, and this is me emailing OSHA. Just an update to let you know that OceanGate Director of HR and Finance, Bonnie Carroll, has left her position due to the same safety concerns as issued in my report, and also the unlawful termination of myself. Bonnie has said she would be more than happy discussing with you or your team all her concerns for health and safety to support my case. I also have the support of 3 very high-profile industry experts who, albeit have not seen my report, but they would be more than willing to discuss their concerns for the safety of crew and passengers, and how what is going on at OceanGate will infect the entire industry. So that was dated February the 28th. Okay. Email from Paul McDevitt, my call him caseworker at OSHA. We sent a letter, this is March the 7th, 2018. We sent a letter to you in OceanGate notifying you that OSHA will be investigating your complaint of retaliation. The US Coast Guard has also been notified of your complaint. So that was the official correspondence that the Coast Guard were notified of what happened. I also reiterate on March the 7th. Thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate all your assistance with this matter. As mentioned previously, Bonnie Carroll will also verify all my concerns if you require her to do so. They never did. They never got in touch with Bonnie. I gave her email, phone number, not once.
Mr. Lockridge?
Yes,
I'd like to touch on a point real quickly.
of course.
That the OSHA stated that the Coast Guard was notified of
Yeah.
your Seamen's Protection Act status, correct? And was there any discussion with OSHA on what the expectation was of the Coast Guard, or what you could expect the Coast Guard to do?
No, they just, what they said was they wanted to get the Coast Guard involved because of the circumstances with regards to the marine vessel that was being manufactured and it being a passenger carrying vehicle. Throughout the 10-month period, I will state I had no interaction with the Coast Guard, and all correspondence, anytime I would speak to Paul on the phone or Tobias, I was told it's in hand and we deal directly with the Coast Guard on your behalf. So I had no interaction with the Coast Guard throughout.
Did you ever personally reach out to the Coast Guard?
No, I did not.
Okay.
No. I thought, in hindsight, I was in good hands with the people that administer health and safety within the US. Okay. So
I'm sorry, Mr. Lockridge, one
Yes,
moment, please.
of course.
OceanGate?
If there is an opportunity for a short break, just to confer for a second.
Let's, before we proceed, take a 5-minute recess. We'll reconvene at 12:08.
Okay, so I'll let you look at this as we wait. Let's move it over, see if comments or do anything. I'll let you look at this. And this is the document, the civil document. And as we look through it, I want to find this is the defendant, this is OceanGate defendant replying to David Lockridge. And after the defendants deny the allegations contained in paragraph 30 of the complaint, and forget it. OceanGate summarily terminated David Lockridge's employment because he raised critical safety concerns regarding OceanGate's experimental and untested design of Titan. In response to the allegations contained in paragraph 31 of the complaint, defendant admit that David Lockridge promptly returned his OceanGate laptop. Defendants deny the remaining allegations contained in paragraph 31. Okay. I'm trying to find the taking his clothes off thing. response to the allegation contained in subpart 33, the complainant defendant admitted David Lockridge partially mooned some members of the OceanGate staff. Okay. There it is there. Let me put it over here.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your patience. Hearing's back in session. We were just trying to align some documents. So Mr. Lockridge, as you continue, if you could just give a reference to the email date or time you're referring to, that'll help everyone else just keep up on this side, sir.
For sure, no problem. So that was March the 7th. OSHA sent a letter to OceanGate and informed the Coast Guard of my complaint. The next event is my wife and I were served a settlement and release from OceanGate's attorneys, basically threatening us.
What was that date?
March the 16th.
And what was that for?
OceanGate wanted me to walk away from the OSHA claim. They basically, there we go. So OceanGate wanted me and my wife to sign this settlement and release. They were basically demanding that I pay them money to settle with them because they'd had to hire an attorney to represent them in the matter dealing with OSHA. On the thing, it basically comes up non-disclosures. They state that if I don't, they will contact previous employers, ex-spouses. OceanGate will contact US Immigration. Fraud, theft, everything's in this.
And what is that?
That is a settlement and release agreement that OceanGate's attorneys served to my wife and I in March 2018 to get me to back off.
OceanGate, do you have that document?
We do not.
Okay,
It's fine. OceanGate's attorneys sent this, so
Understand,
I'm happy
sir.
providing that document.
okay. Since I think we need some more document alignment, this would, and this is important that we need to get into this. I recommend at this time we break for lunch and make sure we have full alignment of the exhibits.
Absolutely.
Before we continue.
Just to be clear, we just want to make sure we identify these documents and can follow because this was not among the ones we just looked at.
Okay, absolutely. This will give us some time. So we will, to allow that process and adequate time for lunch, the hearing will recess at this point and reconvene at 1:45 p.m.